So, good day, everyone. This is the second topic for ES19, which is the introduction to design thinking. What I will discuss is about the definition on design thinking, the steps on the design thinking process, and especially its framework. So, design thinking is actually based on a human-centered design. It is a process that starts with the people you are designing for and ends with new solutions that are tailor made to suit their needs. It is all about building a deep empathy with the people you are designing for. It is also by generating tons of ideas, build a bunch of prototypes, share what you have made with the people you are designing for, and eventually put your innovative new solution out in the world, and it can be used across industries and sectors to approach any number of challenges. It may be from product and service design to space or systems design. So let us discuss about this number of challenges. So what I will show you later is some examples of how might we questions that you can think of if you will design a product, a service, a space, or a system. For products, your first thoughts are of expensive, stylish products. People deserve well, uh, People deserve well-designed products, but also challenges that arise when there are limited resources, services, or infrastructure that require new approaches and elegant solutions. So here are some of the examples that you can think of if you will design a product. We have how might we design a cook stove that reduces the amount of smoke inhaled by a person while cooking. We have how might we build an irrigation pump that can run without electricity grid? And lastly, how might we design a toilet for families living in areas with no sanitation infrastructure? Next is for services. For effective service, it needs to be considered from end to end, from how it is advertised to how it is delivered. For an impactful service, it is essential to gain a deep understanding of the people who you'll be serving, not only what they need and desire, but what limitations they face, what motivates them, and what is important to them. So here are some examples of how might we questions rather that you can think of if you will design service or services. First one is how might we design a water delivery service providing clean drinking water along with health and nutrition products? How might we design new services engaging low income parents in after school education for their children? The next is about spaces. As you can see here in this slide, these are paintings from Van Gogh. So Van Gogh is an artist, and this is actually a Van Gogh digital museum that allows visitors to immerse in his paintings. So for when we talk about spaces, this is the physical environments that give people signals about how to behave and influence how they feel. So by rethinking existing infrastructures, we can create new experiences and interactions in these spaces. So the human-centered design can help make the emotional parts of a space as important as functional. So if we will design space or spaces, these are some examples of how might we questions that you can think of. How might we design hospital waiting rooms to mitigate the transmission of airborne diseases? So this is actually a common question, especially that we are currently experiencing the pandemic. How can we design this infrastructure just to mitigate the transmission of um, any type of diseases, like the virus that still spreading until now. How might we redesign the common areas of a community housing structure to encourage connecting and cooperation among neighbors? This is a common for designing subdivision. And how might we make the space inside the bank less intimidating for first-time savers signing up for a new account? Actually, for designing spaces, this is very common for architecture and especially for civil engineering. And lastly is for designing systems. This is about balancing the complexity of many different stakeholder needs with the needs of the social enterprise. It often involves setting high-level strategy such as the visions, priorities, and policies. So here are some examples of how might we questions when designing systems. We have how might we redesign the school lunch program for an entire city while providing for differences in individual schools? How might we design a system linking social entrepreneurs from around the world? And how might we redesign a banking system for low income citizens who have limited knowledge in banks? So these are some examples of questions of especially that starts with how might we, if you can think of when you design products, services, spaces, and systems. Next is we discuss about the mindset of the human-centered designer. So it uncovered the philosophy behind the approach to creative problem solving and showed that how you think about design directly affects whether you arrive at innovative and impactful solutions. So here are some of the mindset of being a human-centered designer. So the first one is uh, the most important, you learn from failure. Don't think of it as a failure, but think of it as designing experiments through which you are designing uh, for through which you are going to learn rather, and especially that when we had a problem and we got a solution, sometimes we failed from it. Sometimes we stopped from the solution that we had on the problem. And for this kind of mindset, what we need is to move forward and we need to try or do another idea just to provide a solution for a particular problem. Next is you must embrace ambiguity. That is, you may not know what the answer is, but you know what you have to give yourselves permission to explore. So the human-centered design always starts from the place of not knowing the answer to the problem you are trying to solve, and it allows you to open up creatively to pursue lots of different ideas and to arrive at unexpected solutions. It allows you to give yourself permission to be fantastically creative. Next is being optimistic. Optimism is the thing that drives you forward to take on a big challenge, and you have to believe that progress is even an option. Embraces possibility and the idea that even we don't know the answer, we know it's out there and that we can find it. Also, um, other mindsets rather of being human-centered designer is creative confidence. This is the notion that you have big ideas and that you have the ability to act on them. Belief that everyone is creative and that creativity isn't the capacity to draw or compose or even sculpt, but a way of approaching the world. And we have also, you can actually make it. You're taking risk out of the process by making something simple first, and you always learn lessons from it. And you have to make your ideas real. Next is empathy. Being a human centered designer, you need to be empathetic. And this is actually the capacity to step into other shoes, to understand their lives, and start to solve problems from their perspectives. You can come up with any new ideas if all you do is exist in your own life. So this is actually important in human-centered design since the idea that the people you're designing for are your roadmap to innovative solutions, and all you have to do is empathize, understand, and bring them along with you in the design process. And also along the design thinking and being a human-centered design is a designer rather is iterate, iterate, iterate. So this is what an iterative approach affords us is that we gain validation along the way because we are hearing from the people we're actually designing for. It makes feedback from the people we're designing for, which is a critical part of how a solution evolves. By continually iterating, refining, and improving your work, you put yourself in a place where you'll have more ideas and try a variety of approaches, unlock your creativity, and arrive more quickly at successful solutions. So in design thinking, integrated approach is at the core of the design process. So it taps into capacities we all have but that are overlooked by more conventional problem solving practices. Again, it focuses on the human being that is able to uncover through multidisciplinary, collaborative perspectives that render thoughts and processes tangible and paths that lead to innovative business solutions and to identify real problems and solve them most effectively. It is necessary to approach them from different perspectives and angles. So it favor collaborative efforts by multidisciplinary teams with diverse array of viewpoints and interpretations which will yield innovative solutions. It relies on your ability to be intuitive, to recognize patterns, to construct ideas that have emotional meaning as well as being functional and to express yourself in media other than words or symbols. And it also needed in order to search new paths to innovation. Also, it focuses on creating products and services that are human centered, in which the process itself is also deeply human, produce solutions that generate new meanings and activate diverse elements that are involved in the human experience, combines the problem solving roots of design with deep empathy for the user, and the human centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. And for design thinking, it brings everyone into the process, not just only the designers, and making organizations think about how to move faster with iterative speed. So this illustration, as shown here, this is actually some of the parts of the design thinking process. You have actually inspiration, ideation, and implementation. Actually, the design thinking process can be is actually similar to problem to solution, which is represented with a scribble line until you move forward. It is actually form similar to a straight line. So, as shown here above, the problem is represented with a scribble line, and as you move forward, it's straightened up until you go to the solution. It forms with similar to a straight line, and the problem to solution, not a straight line. Same with the design thinking process. And for the design thinking process, it is best thought of as a system of overlapping spaces rather than a sequence of orderly steps. So again, for design thinking process, especially process from the word process, it doesn't mean that it is a step by step, but it is like what I've said, it is not a sequence of orderly steps, but the design thinking process is a system of overlapping spaces. So for the inspiration, This is the problem or opportunity that motivates the search for solutions. Ideation is the process of generating, developing, and testing ideas. And lastly, the implementation is the path that leads from the project stage into the people's life. So it connected by spaces and not steps since they are not always undertaken sequentially. And for the design thinking process, it can feel chaotic for at first, especially for first timers, but later on, they see that the process makes sense and achieves results even though its form differs from the linear, milestone based processes that organizations typically undertake. And take note, this is not linear, but an iterative system with many variations. So let us talk about these three parts of the design thinking process. So the first one is inspiration. As shown here in the slide, this is actually um, the how you think of when you think for inspiration, ideation, and implementation. For the inspiration part, it is actually divergent thinking. It is upward. So you learn directly from the people you are designing for as you immerse yourself in their lives and come to deeply understand their needs. And if you have a design challenge, these are some questions that you can think of. How do you get started? How do you conduct an interview? And how do you stay human centered? Since it is divergent thinking, it is the route to innovation, and it must have diverse group of people that involved in the process, which the people with the capacity and disposition for collaboration across disciplines. So design thinking usually starts with inspiration. So you need to be inspired. And the problem or opportunity that motivates people to search for solution. So just an example in this image, inspiration can be found everywhere, like observing your neighborhood and the people in it. So you need to discover what people needs, not by focus groups and surveys, but by going out and observing the actual experiences of people as they improvise their way through their daily lives. So through observations, people are able to see for themselves what was important and valuable rather than having an outsider that make those assumptions for them. Next is ideation. So for ideation, as you can see here, from divergent, it is converging, then divergent again. So for ideation, it makes sense of what you learned and identify opportunities for the design and prototype possible solutions. So if you have an opportunity for design, these are some questions that you can think of. How do you interpret what you've learned? How do you turn your insights into tangible ideas? And how do you make a prototype? So for the ideation, it is the process of synthesis in which the team distilled their observations into insights that can lead to solutions or opportunities for change. It helps multiply options to create choices and different insights about human behavior. So by testing competing ideas against one another, the likelihood that the outcome will be bolder and more compelling increases. So that's why it's very important that in your group or in your team that each member must have their own ideas. So it's better that you brainstorm with your group members, you discuss it, and you can actually compete your ideas against one another. Because, like what I've said, um, the outcome will be bolder and more compelling. So it's better that you um, have your own idea, or each member has its own idea. And for the ideation, um, interdisciplinary teams typically move into a structured brainstorming process. So it is one proactive question at a time with ideas ranging from the absurd to the obvious. So these are some rules if you do a brainstorming process. defer judgment, and encourage team to come up with as many ideas as possible. So this is for the group that moves to a grouping and sorting of ideas process. And you consider this quote by Linus Pauling. Um, According to Linus Pauling, to have a good idea, you must first have lots of ideas. So, like what I've said, in a group or in a team, it's better that you have many ideas, many um, like your own idea that you can combine, or um, different arrays of viewpoints. And lastly, in the design thinking process is implementation. It brings solutions to life and eventually to the market. So from divergent thinking in the ideation, it moves again to convergent. So for implementation, it is converging. And if you have already an innovative solution, these are some questions that you can think of. How do you make your concept real? How do you assess if it is working? And how do you plan for sustainability? So for implementation, when the best ideas generated during ideation are turned into concrete, fully conceived action plan. So this is actually an for this slide. This is actually an image from Nidec. Nidec is a producer of surgical eye equipment. Accelerated. This is all about accelerated clinical trial evaluations of its ophthalmological devices by using a 3D printer by 3D printing manufacturer Stratasys. So according to Nidec, 3D printing overcomes these bottlenecks by permitting us to quickly validate designs before entering our prototypes into clinical trial validation. So as you can imagine, fully verifying our products is crucial to ensuring that premium quality is maintained. So if we actually base it to our current situation, we're actually in the vaccination stage or phase. So it's very important that the vaccine, that's why vaccine is very crucial for every pharmaceutical companies, because it will be used by the people, uh, by the by the people, and it and for vaccines, it makes sure that the premium quality is always maintained. And for prototyping, it is actually the core of implementation by turning ideas into actual products and services that are then tested, iterated, and refined. So through prototyping, the design thinking process seeks to uncover unforeseen implementation challenges and unintended consequences in order to have more reliable long-term success. Prototyping important for products and services destined for the developing world, where other essential pieces of the system often make it difficult to design new products and services. So prototyping can validate a solution. It may be expensive, complex, and even indistinguishable from the real thing. So as the project nears completion and heads toward real-world implementation, prototypes will likely become more complete. After prototyping and the ultimate product or service has been created, the design team helps create a communication strategy. So you can probably do a storytelling using multimedia or communicate to diverse stakeholder in and outside the organization across language and cultural barriers. Also, design thinking already used intuitively by many but does not move beyond today's conventional problem solving. And the biggest problem in adopting design thinking is the fear of failure. That's why you need to learn from your failure. You need to move forward. And design thinking culture encourage prototyping. It is quick, cheap, and dirty. It is a part of the creative process and not just a way of validating finished ideas. Design thinking can lead to hundreds of ideas and ultimately real world solutions that create better outcomes for organizations and the people they serve. So, in the next slide, this is actually the framework for design thinking. So, it starts with empathy, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Empathy is the core of design thinking. Using a beginner's mindset and immersing yourself in the user's experience to uncover deep needs and insights. It allows you to be open to the new experiences of people from different backgrounds and see things from their perspectives. Defining, it helps you reframe your point of view or POV to see a problem from a different angle. And the next in the framework is ideate by divergent thinking, and it generates as many ideas as possible. And the beginner's mind prevents you from being judgmental about ideas that may be trivial or silly but may spur new approaches to a problem. Next is by prototyping. Beginner's mindset helps remind you that the purpose of a prototype is to answer critical questions quickly and not to highlight your mastery as a designer. It helps us learn, solve disagreements, and test hypotheses quickly and with minimal repercussions. And lastly is test. The beginner's mindset opens you to both the many possibility or to many possible directions of your design and the ways it might address real human needs. So each step along the way affords an opportunity to rethink, relearn, and reboot as needed. So let us talk each of the parts in the framework. So the first is empathy. As you notice here in the image, this is actually the image during the flooding in the Philippines. So by empathizing in this image, you can actually find the problems needed by the people. So what are those problems? These are proper disaster risk management and sanitation. So again, empathy is the heart of the design. Without understanding what others see, feel, and experience, design is actually a pointless task. Again, empathy is the foundation of the whole design thinking process. So, using the beginner's mindset and immersing yourself in the user's experience is a great way to uncover deep needs and insights. It is a journey into the feeling of others. It may be physical or virtual. And good empathy study will give you new perspectives on the lives of your users, including the challenges they face, the things that keep them up at night, and the moments that delight them. It gives insight needed to solve hard, worthwhile problems. It connects designers to the people who will use the products, empowering to create products that ultimately meet real human needs. And humans evolve to have actually a powerful sense of empathy. It helps people collaborate and the reason people uh, became the reason why people became successful as species and collect stories and insights from users. So talking about empathy, we can actually differentiate it with sympathy. So since we have word sympathy, it is actually different with empathy. And when we say um, sympathy, it is actually the you understand someone else suffering rather. But when we talk about empathy, it is by experiencing someone else's feelings. So again, if you talk about sympathy, that is understanding someone else suffering, but empathy is experiencing someone else's feelings. So that's why in the design thinking process, um, especially the framework, it's better to be empathetic than sympathetic. because you need to experience the feeling of the people you're designing for. You need to immerse yourself to them. Next is define. It is actually the reframe the problem or refining the problem can inspire a movement. It is a powerful way to create innovative design solutions to challenging problems, and it can create new and disruptive business models, and it gives an opportunity to synthesize the empathy findings and come up with a statement or point of view that can help reframe the problem and open new and innovative solution spaces. So in define, we have actually three elements. The first one is, who is your user? You take note as many specific details as possible. What is their deep unmet need? And lastly, what is this insightful? It means that you need to list down insights from empathetic process. For define, we have actually the point of view checklist. So here are some point of view checklists or POV checklists. You provide focus and frame the problem, inspire your team. You provide reference for evaluating competing ideas, empower team members to make decisions in response to high level goals of the team, fuel brainstorms by suggesting how might we statements, which was mentioned earlier, capture hearts and minds of people you meet, save you from the impossible task of developing solution concepts that are all things to all people, allow you to revisit and reformulate the POV as you learn by doing, and guide your innovation efforts. Next in the design thinking framework is ideate. So in ideate, the very common is brainstorming. Brainstorming actually adds value to the creative process in ways that don't just involve coming up with ideas. So brainstorming strength from ability to quickly generate lots of ideas to get overview of conceptual landscape, gather a team into a physical space where everyone can share perspectives. You get a client or clients or stakeholders to buy into the design process and learn what is important to these decision makers. And instead of brainstorming, we have also some alternatives. We have sketching and mind mapping. So these are topic or problem in the middle and make connections. So instead of brainstorming, you can do sketching or mind mapping. So the main rules for successful brainstorm is defer judgment. You actually reduced group social inhibition, and no one would be stigmatized by or for shouting a crazy idea, and reach for quantity, boost overall creative output, and increase likelihood of coming up with innovative solutions. So we have actually what you will do before, during, and after brainstorming. So before brainstorming, you set a mission, set up the space, get into the right headspace, and limit the time. During the brainstorming, always say yes. Why? Because to keep energy high and energy flowing, stay on topic, be visual and headline. And after brainstorming, narrow down but not too fast, and capture and move to prototyping. So those are some of the um, um, things that you need to follow before, during, and after brainstorming. Next is prototype. Prototype help us learn, solve disagreements, and test ideas quickly and cheaply. Good prototype is one that facilitates answering the questions you have. And prototype earlier means the better. And we have actually Wizard of Oz prototyping that allows you to learn about how your users communicate before the commitment of writing any back-end code. It creates low resolution prototypes before investing time to build higher versions to test with users, and build a prototype faster by using humans on the back end to save time and resources. We prototype to learn and teach, and it is a key to good empathy. And the key to good empathy, rather, is sharing or co creating a prototype with your users and getting feedback. And the last part in the design thinking framework is test. So the beginner's mindset opens many possibilities. Test early solutions and not be blinded by assumptions. It is the whole basis for prototyping early, and often is intended to keep us from forming attachments to ideas that may or may not be worthwhile. And by testing prototypes with real users in context, observing their reactions and getting feedback, we can actually refine our POV, learn more about our users, and make the next iteration of the product that much better. So again, user reactions and feedbacks useful in refining the problem, understand the users, and product iteration. You um, do early prototype testing to quickly correct course if hypotheses are incorrect, and testing assumptions early with will help build better products faster. So to set up for testing, we have actually three set objectives. That is by questioning what specifically are you testing and what do you want to know, recruiting users, and testing prototype, which you create an experience for them that puts the prototype into a context as close to real life use as possible. So it is a show, not tell. And lastly, review and synthesize observations. And remember this statement: prototype as if you know you are right, but test as if you know you are wrong. So these are the references for the introduction to design thinking process. So you can actually search it online, and I don't know if you can search it online. And if you can, um, the better. You can actually read the book about these references that are related to design thinking process. So the next topic would be the introduction to intellectual property, which will be in the form of a webinar. So stay tuned for the next topic. So thank you everyone for listening.